Scarlet knew how to make a camera behave. On social media she was a storm of passport stamps and first-class slippers, a self-made businesswoman whose blazer sleeves were always just so. Her grid glowed. Santorini blues, Marrakesh terracottas, London marble lobbies where concierges greeted her by name. Captions dripped with hustle, on the grind, wheels up, back-to-back meetings, and her followers clapped heart emojis like an audience trained for ovations. Offline, Scarlet's work was far less hashtagged and far more precise. She was one of the most sought-after professional escorts in the UK, discreet, high-end, and unflappable. She called it hospitality with choreography. Read the room in 3 seconds, dress for the table, be interesting enough to be remembered and calm enough to be trusted. She was always immaculate. Fresh wig for every engagement, manicured hands that gestured like she'd been born inside a jewelry box, makeup applied with the practiced grace of a headliner. Her silhouette, sculpted by hours in the gym and a BBL she never apologized for, turned marble floors into runways. She loved accessories the way chefs love heat: gold hoops, a diamond tennis bracelet, a watch whose face caught light like a small sun. She looked like the version of Success magazines forgot to footnote. Scarlet was a black American who had drifted east with purpose, building her clientele in London's discreet corridors. Mayfair townhouses, Savile Row showrooms, the kind of restaurants that hid their best tables behind curtains. She carried herself like she owed no one a backstory. In truth, the backstory had simply become unnecessary. Bills were paid. Her mother in Maryland called less to worry and more to laugh. Her younger cousin's college fees were taken care of through an anonymous scholarship Scarlet never took credit for. She kept rules, practical, unromantic, ironclad. Never drink enough to blur. Never promise what can't be kept. Never confuse the performance with the person. And above all, never fall. Love was a marvelous language for other people's lives. In hers it was bad accounting. Even so, in quiet moments the choreography grew heavy. Sometimes she would peel off a wig at 2 a.m., line it on its stand, and stare at the woman in the mirror, bare shoulders, bare face, that the world didn't clap for. She'd ask the questions she didn't post. What might softness feel like if it didn't cost anything? Then she'd laugh, set the face again for morning, and go to sleep with her phone face down, the red eye of the alarm glowing in the dark like a promise to herself. The bookings kept coming. The flights stacked. Scarlet collected small cities in her bones and big rooms in her calendar. If occasionally a caption sounded like convincing more than celebrating, only she knew. The internet is generous to women who perform certainty. She gave it a standing ovation and returned to work. Xavier arrived in Scarlet's life like a perfume that announces itself before the wearer enters the room. They met at a curated party in a Knightsbridge penthouse where the ice looked hand-carved and the DJ clearly had a trust fund. Xavier was tall, black, magnetic, and loud without speaking, designer logos screaming across his jacket, rings that flashed like small lighthouses, a chain heavy enough to anchor a yacht. He said he modeled, when the rate made sense, and floated the suggestion of billionaire lineage without ever saying the word. He smelled like saffron and success, and when he laughed people checked to see if they were missing the joke. He targeted Scarlet with the accuracy of a man who collected trophies he believed were already his. "You got that CEO glide," he said, eyes taking inventory with practiced ease. "Respectfully." "Respectfully," she mirrored, amused and unmoved. They orbited each other all evening, banter that sparked, glances that lengthened. Xavier was the kind of man who never waited for a table because there was always a friend of a friend at the door. He booked a booth the next night and a driver the next week. They ate where the menu didn't show prices. They flew to Barcelona, just to reset the vibe. Scarlet kept her footing even as the floor beneath her turned to velvet. He matched her for movement, always in motion, always somewhere better next, and for a moment the performance felt like partnership. Money stories began small. A card acting up at a boutique in Milan. He asked if she could grab it while he sorted the bank. He paid her back that evening, casual, crisp. Another time, a wire got stuck, and he needed to tip a driver cash for discretion. Again, repayment, swift, complete, accompanied by a grin that said, "See? I'm not like the others." Scarlet didn't blink. In her world, logistics failed often. She was trained for contingencies and his proved temporary. Besides, he always made it right. He posted loudly, she posted cleverly. Together they looked like the after-party of a dream. He loved her aesthetic, wigs that shifted with the weather, gowns that floated. "Your art," he'd say, unable to resist staring at her reflection while she adjusted earrings. She rolled her eyes and let him look. Art is art. Stares are currency she knew how to spend. Some nights, when the city pressed close to the windows and even the champagne seemed tired, Xavier would talk fast about deals with edges that moved when you looked at them hard. He was always about to close something. She listened, adding and subtracting in her head, the math not quite neat. But his kisses were distraction enough, and the repayments kept landing. Trust, like erosion, happens grain by grain. Then came the ask that altered the floor plan of her life. He framed it with a sigh and a smile. A time-sensitive investment, a ridiculous upside, banks that dragged feet, when vision moved faster than paperwork. He didn't ask for a piece, he asked for the whole, her savings, everything she'd quietly piled for the day the internet got bored. 48 hours tops, he said, palms up like a promise. I'll make you proud. Scarlet stared at the numbers, then at the man who wore wealth-like costume. Pride wasn't what she wanted. She wanted peace. But the repayments had taught her a rhythm. She allowed herself to hear the beat. The wire left her account with a shiver she told herself was just adrenaline. He kissed her forehead, posted a view from a plane window, and disappeared into business. For 2 days she told her heart to sit. On the third, calls went to voicemail. On the fourth, the number didn't exist. The fifth day she hated the sound her own breath made. Her rules, never fall, never fuse, had protected her from heartbreak. They hadn't protected her from theft. Scarlet's life shrank to the inside of a London flat she barely used and the blue-white light of a laptop open to bank portals that confirmed reality without compassion. The savings were gone. The scheduled posts on her content planner looked obscene. She canceled engagements, citing family matters, then turned off her phone when people who knew how to whisper started whispering. Clients called with impatience dressed as concern. Friends texted question marks and prayer hands. She filed a report that felt like theater. Fraud rarely leaves fingerprints you can read from the stage. For a week, she slept like a struck bell, long, then not at all, then in strange 10-minute clips that tasted like metal when she woke. She lined her wigs like sentries along the dresser, their glassy eyes not judging but not forgiving either. Without the scaffolding of travel and glamour, she realized how much of her worth she'd outsourced to motion. The mirror gave her back a woman who looked younger without lashes and older without certainty. She took off her jewelry and felt ordinary in a way that scared her more than it should have. Shame wanted to be the narrator. It told her she should have known, that a man in a jacket that shouted didn't need to say he was rich. The jacket did, and it had been lying. Shame told her she was a fool for believing a cadence of repayments meant character. Shame said, look at you, selling an illusion and buying one too. Scarlet listened for a while, then remembered she'd survived worse than a con with good lighting. Shame left when it noticed it couldn't pay rent. She gave herself 30 days. She called it a sabbatical because the word sounded like something you might get a grant for. She blocked Xavier everywhere, including the space he was renting in her head. She paused the performance and let grief do its unphotogenic work. Crying folded into cleaning, folded into jogging in old college sweats at dawn along the Thames with a hoodie up and headphones loud. She cooked badly and ate it anyway. She wrote a list titled Facts, and under it, I am safe. I am solvent enough. I am not my worst decision. I am not beyond repair. On day 15 she almost posted a soft return selfie, resetting, recentering, stronger than ever. She deleted it. Strength didn't need a caption to be real. On day 22 an old client, polite, professional, unentitled, asked if she'd accompany him to a conference in Las Vegas. The rate was generous. The dates fit. The ocean inside her tilted toward refusal, then steadied. Vegas would be loud enough to drown out the last of Xavier's echo. She said yes and packed lightly, choosing a short auburn wig that made her look like a new chapter and a scent that smelled like clean beginnings. When the plane lifted through cloud, she closed her eyes, set her jaw, and left the month without a caption at 30,000 feet. Las Vegas sold glitz by the hour, but Scarlet found a corner that forgot to scream. After her client retired early, time zones, presentations, the gentle fatigue of a man who understood limits, she slipped into a lounge tucked behind a row of slot machines. Lighting low, leather soft, Jazz holding the room in a silk glove. She slid into the quietest chair she could find and ordered something with mint and a name too long. He was already there when she noticed him, a black man her age or a touch younger, his presence the opposite of Xavier's. Calm, coordinated, expensive without announcing it. No chains. No logo loudness. A charcoal suit cut like a decision, a watch that could have been museum or minimal depending on how you looked. He smelled like cedar and citrus and something that made her think of open windows. When the server came he spoke softly, when the band missed a note he smiled privately, like he loved imperfection. "What are you reading?" he asked finally, gesturing to the novel she'd been staring through. "The same line for 20 minutes, Scarlet said, refusing charm on principle. "Must be a good line," he said, amusement warming his voice. "It was," she admitted, letting a corner of her mouth lift, "in 2014. He laughed, not at her but with her, though she hadn't meant to offer the invitation. "Jaden," he said, offering a hand she accepted before she could rehearse it. His palm was warm, his shake deliberate. He didn't ask for her story. He ordered her a glass of water like he'd noticed the altitude of her heartbeat and knew how to lower it gently. They talked because it felt less like small talk and more like two people anchoring themselves in a moving city. They covered minor keys, books that saved them from bad nights, songs that made traffic feel like prayer. He said he grew up stateside, built a fintech product in London that sold too soon and too well, and now invested in other people's good ideas. One of the youngest millionaires in the UK press liked to remind him of it. He ignored the articles and read term sheets. "And you?" he asked finally. "Consulting," she said reflexively. Then, perhaps because his gaze didn't push, she added, "Hospitality adjacent." It wasn't a lie, but it was only a tenth of the truth. He nodded as if she'd said everything. The band slid into a standard. Her phone buzzed face down with a message she didn't need. Hours went elastic. He asked if she wanted fresh air. She found herself saying yes. They stepped out onto a terrace where strip lights tried to outshine the stars and failed. They laughed about nothing and something. Time behaved like a friend. When the night thinned, Jaden didn't angle for the next location. He asked if she had what she needed to get safely to her room. He did not pretend chivalry was ownership. He handed her a card, not a personal one oddly enough, but a small embossed square with simply his first name and a number. "No pressure," he said. "Just, if you ever want to finish that line." She tucked the card into her clutch with a care that surprised her. As she walked back through the casino noise, she realized her pulse had settled into a rhythm she trusted. Back in her room, Scarlet looked at the mirror, at the woman with perfect lipstick and a wig pinned into flawless compliance. She did not take a selfie. She slept like someone who'd been given a permission slip she didn't ask for. Jaden's follow-up text arrived the next afternoon as a single line. "Coffee is my love language. There's a quiet place 3 floors down from reality at 4. Scarlet stared, then told the version of herself that ran on caution to take a walk. She went. The cafe was indeed below ground and beyond the noise, tiles cool underfoot, espresso machine purring like a content cat. He stood when she arrived. No flourish, no display. The coffee was already paid for. "Didn't want the queue to steal our time," he said, as if time was something he guarded like a rare vintage. They talked again, and the subjects tilted more intimate but never voyeuristic. Families not as trophies but as weather systems. Work not as clout but as craft. Jaden asked questions the way careful people cross rivers. Testing the stones, never assuming. He did not pry. He did not preen. He listened like it was an investment he expected to mature. He suggested a walk, she suggested the quietest corridor. They moved in the shadow of chandeliers and the echo of slot machine bells, the ridiculous and the real layered like a joke only they found funny. He told her he hated loud clothes because they did too much declaring. "If something is true," he said, "you can whisper it." She thought of Xavier's jacket and swallowed a small laugh that tasted like medicine. When he brushed a crumb from her sleeve he asked, "May I?" before his fingers even moved. Consent as default, not performance. When they stepped through a crowd, his hand hovered at the small of her back without landing, a choreography of care she hadn't realized she'd missed. Scarlet kept her walls, but she installed windows. Jaden didn't try to scale them. He knocked sometimes, "How's your morning? Did you find a breakfast that forgives you?" And when she didn't answer, he didn't punish the silence. He'd send a photo of a page from a book and nothing else. Actions, not speeches. Gestures, not fireworks. They met again the next night, then once more before her client's conference ended. They laughed enough to surprise themselves, the kind of laughter that tells muscles there are uses other than holding armor in place. He kissed her only when she leaned in first, and even then it was a slow, attentive warmth that didn't try to prove anything. When they parted at the elevator, he didn't ask to follow. "Tomorrow?" he said. Not a demand. A hope with good posture. Back in her room, Scarlet placed his simple card next to the mirror. She took off her wig and found that her face, bare, alert, unadorned, looked like someone she wanted to spend time with. She slept, again, like a person whose shoulders had been reminded of down. On her final morning in Vegas, she told him she'd be flying back to London. He didn't go grand or loud. He organized a car without announcing it and walked her to the lobby. "I'll be in London next week," he said, "but if I weren't, I'd still be in the same place about you." She smiled because the sentence was ridiculous and perfect. He pressed nothing but his palm to hers, warm as a promise. On the plane, Scarlet opened her notes app and wrote a new list titled, Evidence. Under it, "I can want without losing myself. Not every quiet man is empty. Not every loud man is full. I'm allowed to be loved in my real name." In London, Jaden's actions made more speeches than most men's speeches. A courier arrived with a monograph from an exhibition they'd talked about and a note, 2 tickets for Saturday. No pressure. I can also disappear like a gentleman if that's what you need. He didn't include flowers, he'd listened when she admitted allergies. He didn't send jewelry, he understood she had her own. He sent time organized into possibilities. Scarlet tried to keep him at arm's length. The arm, however, had grown honest since Vegas. They went to the exhibition and stood too close to paintings without the guards minding. The guards, perhaps, recognized reverence. He reached for her hand as they crossed the street and waited half a breath, so she could be the one to close the distance. He learned her coffee order and the days she despised mornings. He missed nothing and demanded nothing. She, for her part, began to practice truth. At first in small disclosures, she changed her wigs because it let her be new on command. She loved heavy earrings and quiet rooms. Sometimes she fell asleep to thunderstorms on YouTube because the sound of rain forgave her day. He took each revelation like a gift, carefully. "I like knowing what the internet doesn't," he said once, a sentence that spilled warmth into her sternum. One evening she decided pretending was a debt she was tired of paying. They sat in her kitchen, wigs on their stands like an attentive committee, and she let the whole story unfurl. Not the pretty cut, the director's cut. The escorting. The calculus of safety. The choreography, the travel, the gifts, the boundaries. The way Xavier had studied her rulebook and cheated by playing fair until it mattered. The month where shame tried to narrate. The Vegas trip that had felt like air after a long dive. Jaden didn't flinch. He didn't attempt absolution, as if his acceptance could erase the parts of her life that were complicated. He listened with his hands quiet on the table, with his breathing steady, with his eyes kind. When she finished, he asked only, "What do you want now?" The question landed like grace. "I want," she swallowed, "to stop auditioning for a role I wrote for myself years ago. I want to keep providing for my family without selling my piece. I want to learn what living looks like when it isn't a performance." "Okay," he said as if she'd asked whether it might rain and he'd checked the forecast. "Then we'll build that." He said we casually, as if partnership were a default setting. He did not offer to fund her, fix her, or fold her into his world like a project. Instead, he connected her, at her request, to a woman who ran a boutique events firm that actually valued the invisible work Scarlet excelled at. Reading rooms, crafting experiences, making people feel held. Scarlet's first consulting brief arrived 3 weeks later and paid properly. That night, Jaden cooked for her in a kitchen that hadn't expected to host something as domestic as a man whisking without theatrics. The food was good, not showy. His kiss after tasted like steadiness and lemon. When they undressed each other, it was slow, attentive, generous, care rather than conquest, intimacy that asked permission at each new door and left room for no's as honored as yes. Scarlet, who knew performance better than most, felt the difference down to her bones. It was romance without an audience and desire without demand, and she exhaled a piece of life she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Closure, if it comes, rarely knocks politely. 2 months into the quiet new grammar of her days, Scarlet's friend texted a photo from Miami, Xavier, unmistakable in a jacket that looked like a billboard, laughing in a booth too bright. Her body bristled, memory sparking. For a heartbeat she was back in that London flat, refreshing portals, tasting metal. Shame appeared, eager to take the mic. She breathed, named it, and asked it to sit. "Do you want to do something about it?" Jaden asked when she showed him, a question loaded with a dozen other questions. "I want, not to be owned by the impulse," she said. "But I also want to warn the next woman." "You can do both," he said and put his network, quietly, to work. A lawyer he trusted drafted a clear, careful letter. A private investigator surfaced additional complaints, years old and unfiled, from women whose stories rhymed with hers. The point wasn't vengeance, it was a record. The letter went to the right places. The record began to matter. One day, perhaps soon, Xavier would learn that borrowing was a word that banks and courts do not find cute. Scarlet didn't wait for that day to start living. She grew her consulting work one smart client at a time, whispering her rates with spine. She kept 2 private clients whose boundaries were clean and whose respect was not negotiable. She said no to those who confused fee with entitlement. She told her mother, gently and honestly, enough of the truth to make space for a deeper kind of love between them. They cried. They laughed. They planned a weekend in Lisbon just to watch the sea misbehave. Jaden folded himself into her life as a verb, not a noun. He sent calendars, not ultimatums. When he surprised her, it was with reservations at a tiny place that didn't have an Instagram, or a day off blocked on both their schedules labeled, "Be on purpose." He didn't flood her with gifts, he flooded her with presents. One evening, after a day that had too much admin and not enough art, they walked along the South Bank as the city lit itself piece by piece. "You know," Scarlet said, "I used to think love was a trick I'd never fall for because I built all the mirrors. Turns out, I just needed someone who didn't need to see himself in me." Jaden squeezed her hand. "I like your mirrors," he said. "I just want to help you polish the ones that show you to you." She laughed at the line because it was both corny and correct. Then, because honesty was now a muscle she'd learned to use, she added, "And if I ever start pretending again, promise to turn the lights on." "I'll open the curtains," he said softly. "Sunlight does most of the work." A year later, Scarlet's feet still sparkled, but the sparkles were for her, not for sale. There were images of her laughing without angles at a park picnic, a hoodie day where her edges were soft and her captions softer. There were photos of events she'd designed, a wedding where the couple's first dance happened under paper lanterns and no one filmed because everyone was busy crying, a dinner for a small foundation where donors gave because the story was told with dignity, not drama. She posted #ad only when an indie brand she genuinely loved asked, and even then she edited for sincerity. Her followers noticed something had shifted. The comments read less like envy and more like recognition. The escort work moved from center stage to cameo, done on her terms for clients who treated her as a professional and a person. She curated, declined, curated again, and when she said no, she trusted the universe to fill the space with better yes. The consulting grew. A hotel group hired her to train staff on invisible luxury, how to read a guest by the way they exhaled, how to fix a problem before it announced itself. She was very, very good at that, and now she got paid to teach it. Xavier eventually made news in the way men like him tend to. Nothing that gave Scarlet her money back, something that gave her a kind of peace. The letter and the record had not been for nothing. The women whose stories rhymed with hers sent each other messages that sounded like relief. Scarlet read them, then closed the chat and went for a run, the city recognizing her even when she kept her head down. Jaden remained who he'd promised to be, soft-spoken, a man of actions, romantic in gestures that looked like thoughtfulness. A bouquet only when it was her grandmother's favorite flowers. A reservation at a jazz club where the band took requests and he'd already paid the tab. A weekend in Paris only when she said she was ready, and when they stood on a bridge and watched the Seine carry secrets downstream, he held her as if he knew that some memories are best honored, not erased. On their last night there, they returned to a cafe near a hotel where once, years ago, a younger Scarlet had performed being untouchable. The server didn't know them. The city didn't clap. It didn't have to. Jaden slid a small box across the table, not velvet, not insistence, just a simple thing with weight. "It's not a performance," he said. "It's a promise to keep choosing you and to keep choosing the truth together. If you want it." Scarlet didn't cry often. She did then, ruined her makeup gladly, and said yes like a person who had learned what no was for. The ring was delicate, a thin band that flashed only when the light hit the facet at the right angle, like a secret told only to those standing close enough to be trusted. Back in London, life continued not like a story concluding but like one continuing with better verbs. She still changed her wigs because it made her happy, still wore gold because it made her glow, still loved a good heel because sidewalks were stages if you let them be. But when she took everything off at night, the hair, the lashes, the armor, she found she liked the woman in the mirror when she wasn't performing. That, more than anything, felt like the prize. Scarlet sent a message to herself and pinned it where only she could see. "I built an illusion to survive. I built a life to live. The difference is that the second one lets me breathe." And most mornings, when London did its grey sky thing and the kettle clicked itself awake, she breathed in, breathed out, and walked into a day she didn't have to sell to believe.